Here is a typical setup of a car's ignition system, which consists of spark plugs, spark plug wires and ignition coils. Back in the day there also used to be distributors, but today on most modern cars from then on we've got the onboard computer that does the job of the distributor, among other things. So here we have obviously the spark plugs, spark plug cable, ignition coil, ignition coil. For this type of setup it doesn't require many spark plug wires, because this being the ignition coil, the way it works, which is also referred to as coil over plug, we have the ignition coil which is directly over one of the spark plugs, and at the same time it's connected with a small spark plug cable which also powers another spark plug. There is a disadvantage though with these type of ignition coils, and what it is that it produces what's referred to as a wasted spark. See, what happens, you have your 12-volt battery where once the engine is running you have a power of 14 volts being provided at least, and these ignition coils they turn those 14 volts into at least 20,000 volts, if not more. Cars today, they even produce 100,000 volts. So you need all that voltage in order to get a spark created out of these spark plugs. So what's happening is that these type of ignition coils, they're constantly producing a spark when the spark at that particular moment isn't needed to ignite the fuel air mixture. So the end result is you have wear and tear on the ignition coil itself, but mostly on the spark plugs. And the spark plugs consist of a electrode here at the tip, and that electrode over time wears out, and it will wear out even quicker if you constantly have a spark being developed on the head of the spark plug when that spark is not needed. So yeah, spark plugs just wear out quicker, and even ignition coils eventually. So for this instance I'm replacing the entire ignition system on my car, because I noticed, particularly when I'm on 4th gear, there is slight hesitation, and it's not enough to trigger a check engine light for any misfire, because the sensors on a car the parameters have to reach at least 25%, and in my case the parameter hasn't reached 25%, but I could feel it. And also I tested the resistance on these ignition coils. All ignition coils have two coils. They have the primary and secondary coil. So for this type of ignition coil, the primary coil is here where it gets power, and the secondary coil is here and here at the bottom. So I tested resistance in the primary. I had a reading, a fairly low reading, and testing for resistance on the secondary, I couldn't get any reading with my multimeter, even though this technically is still working. For my multimeter not to get a reading could only mean one thing, which means corroded internal connections. So as you can see here, I've taken the boot off the ignition coil, and in the middle of the boot you can see the metallic connector. It's fairly rusted, and also the same here where the boot connects inside. There's another metallic connector, you can't really see it, but that has rusted out, so I couldn't get a reading with my multimeter because of the poor connection here, and as a result this ignition coil, also the other one, was working harder to produce the required spark for the spark plugs. So that was the reason that I couldn't get a reading on my multimeter, and that's the reason why I would feel the car hesitate, even sometimes on idle when I start the engine cold in the morning. Spark plug wires can be also tested for resistance, but in my case, because I'm replacing both ignition coils, I'm also going to replace the spark plug wires and the spark plugs themselves, just to have peace of mind, even though I tested these spark plugs for resistance as well, and because they're almost out of spec, it's also time to replace these spark plugs as well, because they've been overworked because of the ignition coils that were overworking themselves in order to produce the appropriate voltage to create a spark here on these spark plugs. Just for your information, certain spark plugs, mostly car spark plugs and motorcycle spark plugs, have an internal resistor, and that's always symbolized with the letter R at the end. For this type of brand, you can see the R that's at the end of it. That way you know that a spark plug has a resistor inside it. I'm going to demonstrate to see the difference between a 1-out spark plug in resistance and how it compares to a brand new one. So with this 1-out spark plug, using the multimeter, I'm going to connect here on both ends, one on the electrode, one at the tip, and we can see here a reading of approximately 4,440 ohms. Now here with this new spark plug, when they come out of the package, they have this protector. This protector is used to obviously protect the spark plug during shipping, because these come pre-lubed, so there's no need to apply any anti-seize on the threads of these spark plugs. You just take that protector cap off and in they go. Now we'll see the difference of resistance compared to a new spark plug. I've got it connected, and I'll connect the other end here, and we should see a reading of approximately 6,000 ohms. 5.90, 5,900 ohms. So the resistance of any spark plug should be between 4,000 and 6,000. Anything below is garbage. So there you have it. You can see the difference between a new spark plug and an almost worn out spark plug. Also, as these spark plugs wear, the electrode wears down, so the gap increases. So periodically, instead of deciding to throw away the spark plugs, you can check the gap specifications for your car, which is in the user's manual, and then using a spark plug gapping tool, you can check what the clearance is from the tip of the spark plug and the electrode, and if the gap has increased a lot, you can push down on the tip here to reduce the gap size, and that gives a little bit more life to your spark plug, provided that it has resistance within specification. Spark plugs get these brown markings on the porcelain part of the plug, and that's due to the high voltage that escapes the boot or the plug, and it just stains it right there. In order to avoid something like that happening, what I'm going to do with these new spark plugs is I'm going to apply some dielectric grease, and I'm going to apply dielectric grease all around the body of the porcelain part of the spark plug, and a little bit inside the boot of the spark plug cable, and this will insulate the spark plug and the spark plug boot. It won't allow any moisture to enter the area where the boot covers the spark plug. It won't allow any salt that's in the air if you live near the seaside, and yeah, that should provide rather good insulation, and hopefully I won't get these markings anymore on my new spark plugs. So there you have it. That's a brief explanation about a car's ignition system, on how it works, how it operates, what's required. This, by the way, doesn't apply to cars that have diesel engines. Diesel cars don't have an ignition system, so they don't have to worry about this sort of thing: spark plugs, ignition coils, things like that wearing out. Diesel engines operate on compression and combustion to ignite their fuel, whereas petrol operated cars or gas operated cars require an electrical spark of high voltage in order to ignite the fuel.